Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's funny, I just noticed I got the camera in the old position. My friend Carla came over and she was like, I want to see the can. I said, what? Bathroom's right there. She said, no, I want to see the can. The can, it's in the backyard during all your episodes. I was like, oh, yeah. She goes, is it still here? I said, sure is. See, I can even make a can famous. Tell you what. Well, as we come to an end of season 5 here, one, I can't even believe I've been able to think up 520, 30 episodes. And I'm not tooting my own horn because I know some of them are marginally entertaining. So I do think about what shows I'm doing, and it's not typically, let's put it this way, the way David Bowie wrote music is how I attempt to make these episodes, which is you don't just make filler. Ever. Ever. It's best to be silent than to make crap, right? So I'm going to be obviously continuing to make little summer bonus episodes while I try to come up with a brand for season 6. But I think the episode we're about to do here, which you already know the title of, is very, very important. I'm debating of whether or not calling it fake bully science or bully science. We have discussed this subject matter before, a long time ago. And I think it was my pop science episode. But in the pop science episode, the goal was to discuss which science specifically I don't agree with, that I think the most brilliant minds in the world, both past and present, absolutely categorically don't agree with. There's a weird thing in America, at least, and I don't know if this exists in any other place, to be honest. I don't know if I've ever looked at a video and seen it. In America, we sort of have your folks that were, everyone's raised weird nowadays, so it's not like one group's raised well and one group isn't raised well, because there's bad groups, bad parents and good parents on both sides. I think it has to do with whether or not you feel like you fit in. Classically throughout history, individuals that feel like they didn't fit in, which is mainly in their mind most of the time, they don't think they have, they don't believe that they are as valued as much as someone else. It's all in their head. They may even suspect that they haven't amassed enough knowledge and use and utility for society to be of value to the world. And so it's like, it's all in their head. It's all in their head. When we say someone is made equal, we mean it, right? Because I hung out on both sides of the fence. I was a science geek, computer geek, but I was also pretty good at sports, up to my interest that eventually started waning. It was really the coaches. The coaches eventually just made me lose interest in high school because they were dudes with pent-up issues, man. It's like, fuck, dude, you need to go beat something up. You should go fight each other in a bar. Get out of your system. They come to coach us, right? They never taught you anything. They just yell at you. It's really stupid. At least in my school, during my grade. But I would get with kids that kind of didn't know they were a little bit nerdy, and they were great. They were just so excited. They were different, right? And I was different in a way like them. Now, I wouldn't maybe take it to 11 like they did, but I could totally listen, and it was great. Me shutting up is a miracle, right? And so I would learn. I'd just absorb. And then I went to school after school after school. And, honestly, I went to schools where there were no nerds. It was interesting. It was not like everybody was the Fonz or something. It was just everyone's kind of middle of the row, thing. Maybe it has to do something with post-puberty or puberty or something like that. But by the time I got to high school, I had finally settled down for the last school I was going to go to before graduation. It definitely was a nice clan of brilliant super geeks. And I mean, geez, wow. And they had managed to so establish themselves in a little town that they were little gods, and we loved them, especially I was trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And I think I mentioned before, one of the dudes who was like the top dog, he's the one that ported Google Earth from Windows to Mac. Centered it right on our hometown when you launched it, which I don't think happens anymore. But anyway, came to California. Whole new group of people, all different origins. Jumped into the computer industry. The first dudes I programmed with in the TurboTax product, again, I'm like I try to count. I think I'm like the 5th coder for that product, but I was doing the fonts and the icons and I finally did the 2GS version. I was making all the tax forms, blah, blah, blah. I might have been the geekiest guy in the entire company because they were all surfy guys and it was just great. It was just in heaven. Went to the Bay Area, and now all of a sudden, I started meeting Hillary supporters. That very overdeveloped sociopathic element to an individual. Some of them were either beautiful or handsome, but didn't know it and didn't know how to take care of themselves, and so they always felt awkward. Didn't matter what they looked like. They just acted awkward. For whatever reason, the confidence that one gathers through being raised a particular way or experiencing life in a particular way, it would appear that they didn't have it except within their skill set. When it came to programming, came to something technical, they were like Jimmy Fallon in Saturday Night Live, move. Now, there's a reason why I'm going off on this little tangent here. It is literally the basis of why I'm doing this episode in part. There are a lot of reasons why people feel disenfranchised with the world. There's a lot of reasons why people turn into sociopaths. Could be sheer appearance that's causing them issues, mostly in their mind. And, people can look so much different than the rest of us that, which we're all look different too, right? That they get really defensive. And then maybe it's just, attracting whatever sex they're attracted to. That just doesn't work out very well. And so they just get more and more awkward. Again, I told you one of my friends, his father was just not around when he was young. And for whatever reason, his mom was a wonderful woman, is a wonderful woman. But he broke down one night and was very honest with me that he's like, how do I get girls? It was like shortly after we talked, probably of no major contribution on my end. He was balling. It was amazing. But this is about bully science. What the hell am I talking about? Why am I going off on this? Well, it goes like this. I have noticed that the more disenfranchised someone is, the more alienated they seem to appear and behave and even blatantly discuss with me. They are very prone to pseudo-science. And what's so strange is it's almost as if real science and real thought process of logic and counter logic and deducing and connecting and cross-referencing, it's just not a skill they have. And so they take that packaged up worry and they go for it, right? Oh, have you heard about climate change? Climate change. Oh, And here's the mechanism I want to highlight before the year goes too much further, because these are tools that you can use to defend yourself against absorption of bad ideas. Like if somebody says that crap to you enough, eventually your brain's just going to go, well, maybe we are wrong. Let's have carbon taxation and Agenda 21 world depopulation and da-da-da. It's like, all of that's just like slitting your own throat. I mean, you side with them. Just fucking find a high place and jump off already. Save them the bill. Save yourself the anxiety of finally finding out you sold out your whole fucking species to these George Soros, Rothschild douchebags, right? But now when you feel disenfranchised, what is one of the mechanisms that you feel? You feel as if no matter what you say, no one cares. You could even be saying something profound. You know how to perform a tracheotomy to save someone's life in an airport, and they just won't even listen to you. And so we all need to be relevant in this world. We do. And it's a very interesting thing because, freedom, desiring freedom is like number one, and being relevant, I think, is number two. Because those two things will get the ultimate goal, which is having a platform and a paradigm to be loved. I guess there's some sweet loving in prison too, but sure is a lot better when you can pick your partner, right? Everything we do is to get, higher up on the totem, as they would say. What they want to do by throwing these alarmist, because here's the interesting thing. Everything that they're interested in, scientifically in huge flying quotes, is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And one, you're responsible for the tragedy. They aren't. And two, just like the same formula of every goddamn religion on planet Earth, they're the preacher. They're the new pseudo-science preacher who's going to tell you what you're going to have to do to solve the goddamn problem that you created, that you maintain. They're pure green. Because what they really want is a sense of relevance. And then they want something they've never, ever had, at least through perception, but probably haven't. Because most of us shouldn't want to do what they try to do, which is to commandeer and control you. That's what a preacher does. Comes to your door, back in the old days, the Catholic priest, especially when you come to my house in Kansas, he'd ring the doorbell, and here's his thought process is very simple. I've never seen you in church, so you're a goddamn sinner, because there's only one Catholic church in this whole town. Oh, there's 20 other churches in this town, but I've got the only way to God, right? Because what Michelangelo made a painting of Jesus giving the Pope a key, and that's fact. That actually occurred. And so now the guy would always be looking at me through the screen. I've mentioned this guy a couple times. But he had the most sarcastic, scornful, guilt-tripping look in front of me. And I think it surprised him that I treated him with respect, and eventually gave me this super cool picture of Jesus. It was just cool. It was the one where his heart is glowing in the center of his chest, and it's like, I think it was a real anatomically correct heart too. Just like so bizarre. I mean, metaphor, you could just do a little Valentine's Day heart. You'd probably just say, Jesus loves you on the candy or something. But it's cool. I put it up in my bedroom, put it right next to my monitor was here, and I leaned it up against the wall there. It was cool. But I have friends that I love dearly, and I will still love them forever. But they do this because they have done it so many times and they have brainwashed themselves. Sometimes you get a little bit of that salt and pepper of, let me tell you what's real, man. And I have yet to meet one of these alarmists that knows a ton about what they repeat, because they don't get briefed with any level of detail about what they're talking about. Case in point, the buoys that are out there in the ocean, supposedly measuring the heat of the water down below, they're all subsidized and paid for and created by the deep state. There is no company that could monetize that data. So it has to be a government entity. A friend of mine got in her car today, called me on her cell phone, and we were talking about it's warm out. And today it was about 83 degrees tops. I was out here on this patio. It was awesome. Right now it's like probably 68, 69, 70, something like that. Okay. So she says, oh, it's funny. I got in my car. She owns a Fiat. And she said, my car says it's 105 outside because these social engineers screwed around with the thermometer and put it in a place in the car where it's literally overheating 20 plus degrees to give the illusion that you're really hot. 20 plus degrees. Could you imagine that? Imagine being in a hot tub and it's 100 degrees. And then in a split second, it goes to 120. You've got a few seconds to get out of that thing before you start to burn, first degree burns, and probably collapse with heat exhaustion, right? But you're having this conversation with someone. You're just bouncing around conversations. And then all of a sudden, they hit that point where they're like, oh my God, you don't believe something I believe. And it's one of these things. And so they just change the static electricity in the room from a super positive frequency to a low vibration pseudo-science frequency. Plus guilt. Again, they're always innocent. That's the funny thing. They're always 100% innocent of anything. If they are truly, and which they're not, right? But in their brain, I'm doing everything I possibly can. My carbon footprint, blah, 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 blah. I own a Tesla. It gets power from nowhere. Now, as I say these things, please understand, every single way that we generate electricity in America is a shitty way of doing it. Hydroelectric is the way to go. Wave machines off the coast that you don't even see. Geothermal built properly as Caltech initially designed it with closed pipe systems and not open pipe systems. There's a million ways to do it using nature. I don't think cars should run on oil. I think they should run off Stanmeyer's water fracturing engine. So I'm not for a bunch of this stuff, but some of this science is simply insane. The climate does what the climate does. Now, if we could get these planes to stop controlling weather, get a HARP antenna, stop punching like circles inside, cloud formations, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? If we could get countries like China to stop destroying the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Fukushima, well, if that truly happened, it's truly an accident, But I think that we should rethink some of that technology. But the bully factor is so ironic because, some kids are bullied. And it just blows my mind that this stuff still exists because, man, I went to a lot of schools when I was a kid. And the second a bully showed up, with one exception, because the kid was mentally not stable, everybody would the dudes would it barely ever happened, right? You would hear about maybe one thing, but everyone would go kick the guy's ass. 3 or 4 of us would get together and go chase the guy down. It's like when I became a lifeguard, I finally saw quite a bit of this, playful water things where big kids are trying to pick on little kids. And so you see a little bit of that. And to you, it's nothing, right? I'm like, 16, 17 years old, yelling at a 14-year-old. It's like, but to the little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, it's like, to them, it's a traumatic situation. They don't know the parameters of their safety, so they think they're going to die just because a rubber ball hits them in the head. But some people get really bullied. Beat up. The shit stolen. And so those kids might be some of the people that grow up into this. I think they turn into the boy called Sue, and they get a little stronger. It's an unfortunate way to do it, but it's, I'm trying to get specific, but I'm also trying to get non-specific because I don't want to, hurt anybody's feelings in this world. But Some folks have lived really crappy childhoods. And so, what did we talk about the other day? They're the loser, and the person beating them up is the winner. So sometimes when they grow up and have kids, they beat their kids since now they're the winner and the kids are the losers. They get to have that other feeling. Big brothers and big sisters have known to do that to their little brothers and little sisters. Part of it's hazing for life. You know, like my Italian friends taught me that for the boys' side, I don't know what they do with the girls' side, but for the boys' side, they smack you around constantly. It's with love, kind of. It's with a lot of love, actually. But it's, you know, kind of get you ready for bad neighborhoods, tough life. Life doesn't care if you live or die. It just doesn't. It just is. It's indignant or I should say, ambivalent to the whole thing. So if you're in a conversation, just for the general archetype, watch for this because it's fascinating. It's utterly fascinating. One, you know, the psychological one is, it's sort of like someone taking a proverbial gun out of their intellectual pocket and pointing it at your face and saying, you're one of those people. I'm going to threaten you now and you got to do what I say. You're like, okay, all right. What do we have to believe here, Mr. and Mrs. Thought Police? So if they didn't have control when they were kids, they definitely want control when they're adults, and it becomes this beautiful thing. The other one is to know enough information to be dangerous. Now, we all fall in that camp a little bit, but what's really interesting about it is I've heard these defense mechanisms, and I've mentioned them many, many years ago, but for instance, when, you know, I probably spent, let's see, one, you know, I mean, most of you know I've got a pretty good background in physics, but when 9/11 came around, you had architects of engineers for 9/11 Truth, which is still functioning to this day, and they explained the relevant physics that you need to understand about objects falling down, you know, a banana splitting building. And so you didn't have to have a PhD to understand basic physics because then, you know, all of it comes back to you. It's like riding a bike. Again, the first thing we learned in physics in my high school was you had a beam of steel of a certain strength, density, width, height, and all that kind of stuff, supported between two pylons, and then they put weight on it, and they wanted to see how much it would naturally bend without any weight, then with weight, and what would be the breaking point of the beam, where you would literally accelerate the particles so much that they would heat up into a molten state for a split second. And so I was at this party with a very, very good friend of mine, very famous guy in Hollywood. And he and I were like best buds. So we still are to this day. And I'm just, you know, chilling out. And he comes and grabs me. He says, you got to come over here. And he takes me over to like three sitting on a little love seat, and then one dude sitting off to the left. And most of these folks are directors or some participation in Hollywood today. Some of them are retired. Pretty young though. And two of them were like, well, at least, I think two of them were former NSA, which is interesting. So very loyal, very patriotic. And so you're not fighting facts anymore. You're fighting patriotism, you know, moon landing, defense barrier stuff, right? But what you'll get all the time from certain folks is that I start mentioning all the stuff about 9/11 because he says they're talking about 9/11. You got to sit down and just tell them what you know, get in the conversation. I'm like, okay. So I sit down. I think I was sitting on the floor, and they'd never seen me before. And so I start mentioning some of the stuff, and one, you know, two or three of the guys are like, yeah, that's what I heard too. And, you know, it makes a lot of sense. So it's been peer reviewed kind of in the group, but there's one dude who doesn't want to believe it. He's the biggest NSA dude. And his defense mechanism was to say, well, do you have a degree in structural engineering? I'm like, oh, we're going to go there, huh? I said, no, but I've spent the last, probably at the time, about 4 or 5 years rehashing all my physics, learning about all this stuff, learning about all the deception from NIST, from FEMA, Purdue University creating shitty simulations, negating most of the structural pylons in the Pentagon and creating a pancake scenario where they had 30 floors stacked on top of each other, but in real life there were not 30 floors, like when it all fell down. Popular Science magazine lying. I mean, just tons of it, right? So you will get that defense. If you try to defend it with facts, they can pull that little trump card out, and you have to be willing and able to describe while your information is still relevant. Prediction models are a mechanism of theirs, right? Al Gore's reverse hockey stick. I don't know why they call it reverse. But, his fucking movie, Inconvenient Lie, right? December 2006, he has this thing where he's showing you this accelerated exponential curve that is so steep by 2010, he had to go around the back of his movie screen and he had to flip a cardboard thing up or something so that you could see the rest of the curve because it went off the screen. Again, Montecito was going to be underwater and he owns a house and lives there right now. Nothing's risen, jack shit. Everything that's happened to the environment since Al Gore made his movie is completely natural cycles of the earth. They said it was going to get really hot. They called it global warming. Well, then they realized we were in the phase of the mini ice age, and so they now call it climate change, which means they get to take advantage of all things that happen. It's all those tornadoes that just happened in the Midwest. It's all climate change. Well, chemtrails have been now tracked changing the weather, period. China changed their weather for the Olympics. People do it all the time. But what's fascinating is, at least with some of my friends, they will have just sort of the highlights of the theories. And then what they do in their brain, because they're not really interested in, I should put it this way, they're definitely interested in making the world a better place, like almost every human being on planet Earth is, except for a few douchebags that try to get you vaccinated, right? So we're kind of all in this together, trying to create the same environment. But when you punch into their data and they'll bring some data to you and you'll go, well, do you know who that guy is? Well, kind of, yeah. Well, you know who he works for? Do you know who George Soros is? No, I never heard of that guy. Then you better be really quiet from this point forward because ironically, with a giant pun, they've only touched the tip of the iceberg of the truth of the situation. They don't know about carbon taxation. They don't know how it's going to work. They don't know about Agenda 21. They don't know about the Georgia Guidestones. They don't know anything. So they come to you with a pixel of a 4K screen, and they're telling you that they know what the picture is. No, they don't. I'm yet to meet someone who schools the shit out of me on this stuff. I mean, it would actually be kind of nice, not I'm going to try to size you up to see if you got a PhD in this and that, as if you need PhDs for certain things. You don't. I'm not a car mechanic either, but I can change a flat tire. I could probably get anything done on my car. I've changed my power steering engine or motor in 15 minutes taking pictures just because I read a forum online. I saw the pictures online of how to do this. Pictures weren't even that good. But I went underneath and pulled the power steering motor out and tossed it and put a new one in. And I took pictures. It would have been done in probably 8 minutes had I not taken photographs. Okay. Did I need a PhD for that? No. Did I need to go to some trade school to do it? No. The notion is that there's these gigantic tables of cause and effect in the world. And if you don't know the indicative cause and effect models, then you just can't comment at all. Now, that's very relevant in certain areas. And one of the biggest areas that's relevant is the human body. Like, we know how to take vitamins and don't eat too much sugar, don't drink booze, don't do too many hardcore drugs and blow out your T cells. And then they say you died of AIDS. We know those basic things. But man, how do you cut a human body open and start doing surgeries and, how do you take part of a colon out and then make the two halves connect together and take an artery from a leg and put it into the heart? I mean, that stuff is where you need massive skills, confidence, and you just have to be a special human being. But we don't contest those procedures. We let those geniuses be the geniuses. But somehow, I don't know, temperature. Think about it. Temperature. I don't want to get off on a particular rant. But then they also sensationalize things that are just absurd comments. Like one of the conspiracies on their end of the game, which I've only heard one of my friends really champion this whole thing, but this person must have read an article or something and then took it completely as truth without applying like regular logic to it. And this is the, maybe some of you have heard this, that we're going to run out of clean spring water. Like it's as if the whole world's going to go salt water. Oh, okay. So the process of evaporation is basically what you're saying the sun is going to cease to do, right? Because the more the world is covered in oceans, I think we're pretty much at a fixed model for any one of our lives, right? We're not going to gain any new supermass openings in the world. Hopefully, there's no gigantic, 30, was it Geiger counter earthquake in the Midwest or something. But someone did this graphic online. They created a sphere of all the natural spring water in the world. And then they put it next to the surface of the earth. Then they pulled the camera back. And of course, the earth is gigantic next to the sphere. And they said, this is all the water we have that's clean from nature, meaning not salt water due to dying fish and feces and stuff in the ocean. It's amazing how much fish have to die in the ocean in order to salt the whole place up. It's crazy. But just like reverse osmosis, the evaporation process can't lift the salt to the sky. And so it takes just fresh water. It's called clouds, right? And it carries it into the mainland and it drops it. Just ask people in Seattle, ask people in Oregon if it rains, ask people in Hawaii if it rains. It rains everywhere. And so the stuff gets trapped, goes into the mantle of the earth. We have wells and all kinds of stuff, and we drink it and use it. It's an everlasting process. Same with oil, right? So I've been thinking, what is a response when you really want to sort of address the issue that's going on, but you don't want to lose a friend. And, if you love your friends, you never want to hurt their feelings. That if your friend's going to continue talking like this every time you get together, and luckily my friends are so far not like that. It gets mentioned, but we don't argue about it. We just know we don't agree. But if you had to bring it up and you could take the attitude of like, don't do that. And they're like, don't do what? Don't try to take control of me with your fear-mongering science, right? Your bully pseudo-science. Oh, now you're confronting them. You're also taking away from them at that moment their dignity. You're taking away their pseudo-control mechanism that works with all their other sheepish friends. Because what if you get two of these people together? Oh my God, why they don't just commit suicide? I don't know. The world's overpopulated. Oh yes. And then all this other stuff. And it's like, well, hey, why don't you guys make a pact, go out in the woods and remove two off the planet, right? But they never do, right? Bill Gates talking about depopulating the world. Well, hey, dude, I could think of a fake computer scientist that's flapping his mouth right now that could be the first one to go. So how do you reply? I think one of the things you could say is I really admire your dedication to making the world a better place. I truly admire that. Don't change. Always look to make things better. Now, you know that in whether or not you have a friend of one kind or another kind, whether or not you could possibly get them to go down a rabbit hole with you that you've been down. This is why it's fun to learn all conspiracies of all kinds so that you can dialogue about them intelligently, deeply. I mean, imagine someone brings up Planet X theory to you on the conspiracy side, one of us. Someone's really hot on that, thinks they're seeing two suns. When they're usually seeing atmospheric mirror effects off the ocean or something. Almost all the footage I've ever seen of more than one sun is shooting right over the ocean at the sunset. At least where I am, because the sun, that way's land and that way's the sunset and it's ocean. But it would be good to know, like if I said, do you know the Planet X theory? Oh yeah, totally, man. Well, what is it? Well, I just know that there's this planet that's going to come by and a bunch of meteorites are going to hit Earth, and the president's going to go into a bunker, and like that's going to help. Seriously, there's no science to that whatsoever. I mean, a meteorite, come on, if it's as big as a Greyhound bus, you're going to have to be like 3 or 4 miles underneath the ground to not have an impact crush you to death immediately, right? It may not hit you physically, but it's going to compress all the rock where you're sitting and you're going to die. Yeah, sure, maybe you avoid some fallout. But the story hinges on someone claiming to channel an alien consciousness from, I think, planet Nibiru, right? And that's how the whole thing started. So it's like, well, do you believe in channeling? Maybe even sucker punch him, Oh yeah, Planet X thing. Hey, let me ask you, do you believe in channeling? Well, what do you mean? Well, someone talking to another spirit from another realm, or especially to alive people. Like, do you think that you could channel another person on the other side of the world? Like I could talk to you, but I'm really talking to this woman on the other side of the world in India, and you guys could talk to each other, and then I could talk to her. Do you think you could do that? No, man, that's ridiculous. Why would anyone think they could do that? Like, oh yeah, me too. I'm exactly with you. Well, it's funny because that Planet X thing, it comes from a channeling. Oh, it does? Yeah. That's where the whole theory came from. And then just drift off, change the subject and let them think about it for a little while, right? Don't put a spotlight on them and undress them. The whole thing in my brain sort of turns into a metaphor of like, you go to a friend's house, let's just say, not someone you're going to try to date, because this wouldn't work if you're going to try to date them, but you go to your friend's house, and let's just say that they have dealt with some traumatic situation that has changed them temporarily while they go through the traumatic situation. They've lost a friend, a family member, their job, whatever. And because they're under this massive duress, they haven't cleaned up their house in a really long time. So you go over there, and it was clean last time you were there. And now you go inside and you're like, oh shit, this is bad. But you got energy. They don't. You have a clear mind. You are not suffering at this particular moment in time. They are. And so maybe, without even asking them, you just start picking up stuff and moving stuff around and throwing stuff in the trash, and you don't make it obvious, right? Because then they might get embarrassed. Oh, don't worry about that. I'll clean it up later. That's cool, man. No. You're embarrassing me. Stop. You're embarrassing me, right? So you just kind of do while they're not looking. And you'd be fixing these things. This is sort of what we're doing with the planet now because of again, Mockingbird Press, these scientists. I mean, think about it. One of my little hidden fantasies in my mind would be to have a show with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know what you'd call it, but I think it'd be a slam dunk show. And it would be titled something like Conspiracy versus Reality or something like that. And what it would be is that there'd be a series of subjects that we would be discussing on that particular day. Whatever would fill up probably a 22-minute slot. Well, we flip a coin at the very beginning, the conspiracy coin. One side's a tinfoil hat guy, and the other side is like a dead president, right? And it determines which one of us goes first. Now, I'll be the tin hat guy, of course, right? But he and I have both prepared in PowerPoint with our producers and some illustrators and all this royalty-free content or content we paid for. He explains gravity, then I explain gravity. He explains space-time fabric, I explain ethereal fabric. He explains 9/11 official story, I explain it as a conspiracy, using my physics, right? Because I could always get this guy to utterly collapse, because I can explain things, I think, such that anyone can understand it on planet Earth, from a little kid, as long as they can understand English and concepts. I can dial down to them and feed it to them. And this, for me, would be cleaning up the mess that these folks have put together. But here's what's interesting about that format of that show. Neil deGrasse Tyson, in this particular situation, has already got everyone on his side in terms of the overwhelming majority of the world. And he has it for two different distinct reasons. For the very few that would attend the show live, and for the many that would watch the show in whatever format it's on, who are educated in the science that we might be discussing, for instance. And I'd be prepared for those people too, of course. He can just lean on published materials, peer-certified shit, right? Pop science, because the colleges are all upside down. Teaching gravity as a phenomenon. Give me a break. What else in life is a phenomenon but is true? Nothing is de facto true with the word phenomenon as by the third or fourth word in the definition of gravity. See how that works? The other thing he could lean on is his own PhD. And he could explain things in the pseudoscience way, because pseudoscience is not ignorant. It's just, in many cases, wrong. Well, how does the format of pseudoscience work, which allows them to bully the rest of the world into it? They simply tell you a story that you can believe. In some cases, for instance, the beginning of the universe being the Big Bang Theory, people love that because that takes away the hideous, acidic sort of logic problem that the universe probably simply exists. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. We have beginnings, middle, and ends. And so our hubris demands that the universe follow the same cycle as mankind. Because we see a plant grow, and we see a plant die, and then we see another plant come up in its place, and we see the cycle. We see ourselves born into this world, and then we put our loved ones down. It is a very undeniable cycle for us until you grow up out of that and you realize that we're infinite beings. But then there's the patriotic defense mechanism, like we always talk about. People in the audience, we'd have to do the moon missions on one of the episodes, right? Probably take up the whole episode. He goes, then I go. He might, maybe the formats, he refutes what I put down. It'd be almost like a court case, right? I'd have to give him my discovery, then he'd give me his discovery. No one's to pull out anything that wasn't put in discovery so the show goes well. Or maybe we have a big last minute, 5-minute surprise battle between each other where I bring a piece of information he's not ready for, and he brings a piece of information I'm not ready for, and we go for it, right? And through the magic of editing, we have a little bit of time to think about things before we respond, and it's all cut out of the show, so it moves fluently. It would make us look like uber geniuses. But the moon missions, as we've always discussed, come with patriotism, and you don't want to think that man hasn't done something, right? So that's another reason why pseudoscience wins. The second one is straight up fear. We don't want to think that our country would attack us. Ever, ever, ever. So part of it's the patriotism, but the other part is like, even if you could get me over that hump, someone says from the audience, there's no way that I am prepared to accept super mega evil stuff. Why is that? Because the audience isn't evil. And it's sort of this endearing property in people that they don't want to think that the world is bad. And then, and then you're kind of like, yeah, you've probably done it yourself, where you're looking at someone going, and inside your voice is saying, is it really important that we bring one more person on to the 9/11's an inside job thing? I don't know. Probably valuable if we could get it to happen. But for every person you're staring at that doesn't want to go there, they're not going to sleep well. If you did convince them of this, maybe they won't sleep for weeks like most of us when we first woke up. Maybe just let it go with the particular individual. Again, probably one of the most tumultuous decisions a parent could make in the 21st century is you've got little kids and you're a parent and you're obviously protecting them from the elements, from the evil elements of the world, bad people, bad content, bad cultural stuff. Maybe you homeschool them for many, many years, and you do it not only to make sure they get good science, reading, writing, arithmetic, they get good social sciences, just everything that's the meat and potatoes that we used to teach up until about 1985, when I think it was math became an electoral thing in 8th grade when I was a kid. I'm 50 years old, man. That's 1984? No, 1983 to 84. It was over the PA at my school that math is an electoral thing. And I was just like, really? So kids barely know any math, and they don't know how to balance a checkbook, and they don't know how to make a budget and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to leave them hanging? All right. But then you look at your kids and you're thinking, crap, at some point. And your kids are probably really different from each other as well. One's perhaps very edgy and one is like very fragile. Very good. And they'll be fine when they grow up, but for now, they're still fragile. Well, hell, you don't have all your kids on the same day. And so one of your kids might be 2 to 3 plus years younger than the one you're going to brief eventually, right? Now, what would be a total fantasy with the Deep Thoughts University is that we create a homeschooling educational curriculum for parents that very cleverly inserts the relevant sciences such that when they get to theories that are bad, they deduce it on their own. What if you taught your kids physics at like maybe 9, 10 years old? You just get them to the basics, right? Don't worry about the equations as much as the sort of cause and effect, reaction and equal and opposite reaction stuff. So that they look at things and like, well, that requires force. And you're like, you're right. And, you could even play stupid if they're really young. I never thought about that. You let your kid totally decipher 9/11. They're like, yeah, I don't know what happened there. Building 7 was definitely imploded, Dad. Yeah, you're right. Oh my gosh. Very observant. How did you come to that conclusion? Well, look at this, that. You can hear the explosions, can't you? Yep, you sure can, can't you? Looks like the center pylon blew on that thing. Remember you taught me about how they blow up buildings because it was interesting? I'm a boy. Yep, sure, I did. Remember when you took me to see a building destroyed and you told me how center pylons are blowing out of big buildings? Well, I could see it right there in the film, Dad. You're like, yeah, my God, you're right. And then you say the magic phrase, you go, well, maybe all those architects and engineers are right. What do you mean, Dan? Well, check out this website. And you just leave it up. And the kid just goes through it. And in 2 days, they're utter authority on it. Then their minds are open. If you teach them what gravity really is, they hear about the Big Bang and, eventually they go, wait a minute. If gravity is simply a negative pressure between ethereal particles, which makes gravity immediately work. And that's what, all the classic scientists who discovered electricity relied on to invent all of their sciences. Then they're like, what would be pushing the Big Bang together? That's a good point. I think nothing, because particles do not talk to each other. Atoms do not exchange information with each other across the universe. Perhaps if they're engaging in electrical valence, yes, they exchange electrons. I told you in the first season, probably within 10 shows, this show has the charter. And the charter is rebuilding the planet from the bottom up. Meaning us, the people who are listening to the people from on high, teach us these pseudo-science things. Well, we've got to clear the slate, cut all the umbilical cords to those folks, right? If you think about it in the metaphor of a computer being hacked, what's the first principle of hacking a computer? Getting access to it. Well, it used to be that someone had to break into your house and get on your computer and go through a password barrier and then start searching for files. And they'd have to put other storage devices onto your computer to lift files off. Maybe they took pictures of the screen at the worst case scenario. In today's world, it's all internet. People walking onto our computers because the people who create the operating systems have installed back doors to let them walk right in. So if we were to take that and turn it into an analogy for our education, especially with our kids and us, then the whole thing is a game of cutting off the umbilical cord. Again, the guy that taught me security, encryption, and private and public key systems, creating those big giant prime numbers and all that good stuff. He had just secured NORAD just before he taught me, which I think was about a 6-week thing, which may sound like a short period of time, but there's not much to it. Again, didn't need to get a PhD in encryption. Just to get you folks that aren't programmers to understand, I entered 1996 knowing very little about the internet. I had been on it in the text form in about 1990. I did a Telnet session and watched my buddy check his email through Telnet. 1993 to 95, I was visiting some websites, but had no idea how it was working. My boss, I think it was like summertime or spring or something. It was like March. He brings me into his office. He sits me down. He goes, "You're going to program the internet extension to our database package." I was like, "What? Doesn't that take a lot of training?" He's like, "No, it's easy." And he grabbed a piece of paper, drew on it, and just kept talking to me for what amounted to, I'm not even joking, 30-minute session with this guy. And I looked at this piece of paper and I was like, "That's that easy?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I need you to create a web browser. I need you to create a web server. I need you to create a bunch of, page scraping technology. I need you to create an email package with enclosures. I need you to create an FTP client." I was done and standing in front of 600 people, or I was sitting actually. Everyone else was either sitting or standing in this room, demoing all my products. What was that, 3 months? That's how fast you can learn some of this stuff without formal educations in those particular areas, right? I think you guys are all very aware of the old saying, if you keep repeating the same thing, expecting different results, that's the definition, the purest definition of insanity. So, based on that little statement, we have to start thinking differently about all things that we think need to be corrected, course corrected, completely changed. And this religion, which is now science with a capital S and flying quotes and a neon sign, has to be disabled. The challenge is today is that the school systems are so atrocious, at least in America, that you have your geeks that do really well. But what's fascinating about it is that in my school history, okay, and again, I didn't hang out, I went to so many different schools in different towns that only the kids from my hometown were actually ended up coming back to graduate, or the kids that I remember, and then got to see take their education and become something or not become something. Now, again, no one has to be famous or anything like that to be an amazing person. There are people that went off to become mothers, and they're the most amazing humans on planet Earth. So, and dudes went off to just, have a normal 9-to-5 job. They fish, they take their family on vacations. Those are completely super successful lives, right? I guess as long as they don't drink the Kool-Aid and vote for the wrong thing. But I know people with, 4.0 grade point averages who really struggled with life. And I mean, they made some super duper bad decisions, man. I mean, I won't even get anyone's personal life, but I mean, maybe they're better today, hopefully, right? We all make mistakes, but some of these people with great, 4.0 grade averages, and they were telling me they're going to go to med school and do all this other stuff. Some of them actually enrolled and then failed instantaneously. And part of it's because, studying and memorizing and repeating is something that's some people are really, really good at. And they tend to get these degrees. But post-degree, they can't write a paper. They can't become an educator because they forgot everything that they learned, because all it was regurgitation. They kind of have an instinct about things sometimes, at best, for the people that don't do too well. So I've said several times, one of the best things you can do for yourself, and again, for those of you from big giant towns, big giant schools, and you only knew a few people, I understand why you don't go to class reunions, but I feel like I have totally lucked out with the teeny tiny town, teeny tiny group of people, and now I get to see the full ecosystem of humanity from high school up. And some of the kids that were not that good in school became amazingly successful people. And again, this isn't necessarily anything that's going to, hit the news, but, they created businesses. They were just really clever. Because for them, it's the old psychological two-party system, which is either you're a stringer or you're a grouper. Stringers are really good at taking tests and reading books, but they also feel guilty if they skip a page because it's not that relevant to, or maybe the author's, reiterating a little too much. And you're like, okay, I get it. Let me go on to the next page here already. Because life isn't a stringing experience. Go here, do this, do that. You make this paycheck. You never get fired. You got a pension. You can retire at 60 or whatever. All my buddies in Hollywood work until the day they die because they love what they do. I'm a chronic grouper, at least in a natural state. I'm a grouper. Life is exactly how my mind thinks. It's object oriented, right? Anything can happen at any point in time. And the way you survive it is to be as informed as possible about, what could happen. And then you're ready for it and you pine for it. We're in a situation now where people, people are bringing their businesses back online. I've now got some clients that went dead whenever this thing started. They're now coming back online, and through the grapevine, I'm getting, a little bit of action here. So it's good. But yours truly just can't sit around forever making no money. I'll lose my house. I'll lose my car. I'll lose everything that I own because I won't have any money to put it anywhere. And, places you can go to, put your stuff in storage, I guess, and go squat at somebody's house. What an intrusion. And then you've never done that in your entire lifetime, and you'd have to do it, The more that you understand the stringing and grouping theory, usually stringers are very left brain and groupers are very right brain. Over the course of your life, we need to become both. We really, really do. And it typically naturally happens, which is nice, right? What I find with these bullies, and it's not the traditional bully, right? That's really trying to harm you. It's just someone that's trying to force their method on you, is they're usually stringers. Because in their mind, it's just a simple process. I'm going to threaten you, which will inadvertently put me in control, it'll take my value proposition to the conversation to the next level, then I expect you to shut up, because you will have to take my word for it that you're a moron. And then you better listen up, buddy, because I'll tell on you, sort of what is happening. Look at this mask fiasco we've got going on in the world right now. I'm telling my friends now, I said, look, everybody wearing a mask right now, if there's a second phase of this virus that's real, let's just put it that way, they're going to be the first people to get infected, the first people to have the roughest ride with this thing, if not a fatal ride. Those of us still mingling, keeping our herd immunity up, not overdoing hand sanitizers and washing ourselves every single time we just enter reality, our immune systems will be as high as possible. Again, you have to eat right. You have to take your vitamins and get some sun on your face and all those good things. But it's funny. I went to a grocery store today, and I've got a mask in my car. I just won't do it. I mean, I'm just not going to fucking do tyranny. I'm just not going to ever say to anybody, yeah, I put a mask on, If I was sick, maybe, and I got to go in public. It's almost at the point now where I think maybe I'll take up the Asian technique, which is if you're sick, you're really contagious. So you've got a cough or whatever, which doesn't really happen to me anymore because I take my C and I get in the sun and I eat fairly well. But if I did, maybe I would wear a mask just to be polite to others. Take my food home instead of eat it in public, But for me, that has logic to it. But we're sitting in the middle of a cesspool of extremely well-funded pseudo-science. And, where they don't care if you believe it or not, it doesn't get a hell of a lot of funding. But they just put a trickle of funding in it constantly, right? So, the fact we went to the moon is mentioned all the time. Big Bang theories, that kind of stuff. Those are things they don't really care whether or not you believe in or not. Certain people do, but they're a small group of people. And then we have things like climate change, which is part of Agenda 21's backbone. It's the skeleton of Agenda 21. They're putting tens of hundreds, if not, of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars every decade into making that come true, because that's their fantasy. I'm going to tell you, I think I said it in the other episode, but that 2012 Olympic ceremony has awakened more people than anything I've ever mentioned to anyone ever. They have seen the coronavirus stage. They've seen the Grim Reaper, who was, 20, 30, 40 feet tall, seeing these dancers on what looks like about 1918 circa beds. They're reenacting the death, except it's not an influenza, which is H1N1, which is the 1918 flu. They're standing on a corona stage. It looks exactly like the coronavirus, man. Online, people are rejecting it like crazy. In the comment sections of articles and posts on Twitter, brilliant people, the smartest people we have on planet Earth, are fighting back. And because these people are sheep, you simply have to remind them. Because again, what they really want is to be on the winning team. They want to be relevant. They want to have value. Well, the first thing, like I mentioned many, many years ago, is that we have to be kind to everyone. Constantly. This isn't something you switch off. Maybe if you're going through a traumatic situation, but if you are, and you're being a little cantankerous with the world, or dialed out, or whatever you need to recover, perhaps you limit your engagement with other people until you get through your funk. But if you do have to engage with someone and you're feeling like you're having a really bad day, tell the other person that this is what you're going through right now. I've been in public places 100 times where people would say, hey man, I haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? And I'm just standing there, in line or something. or even a random person. Say, well, my mom died yesterday or this morning or whatever. My best friend just passed away, just got the call. And the whole room atmosphere changes, and we are all on the side of this person, wishing them well. I mean, we're wishing them well in prayers after they leave, even if we don't know them. If they look at us, we definitely give an empathetic face, and they feel love. They feel like they got a little bit of support from the community, right? I don't think, I can almost guarantee you, my parents never ever took me aside and said, be good to other people. I had an asshole cousin that was just, he's mentally fucking deranged. I don't know what his problem is. But I told the story a long time ago, but this was a very groundbreaking moment for me as a person. And I'd be interested in your stories where you might have had a pivotal moment as a kid where you decided to be good, not to terrorize your parents, not to terrorize the neighborhood, just be known for being a good person, But I must have been like 3-4 years old. Again, hardcore listeners, you've heard this, but my cousin was standing on my bed, and he had all my toys, and he was throwing them down on a hardwood floor. And what was funny about it is my personality at the time was just sort of like, it was like I was an old man in a little kid's body, and I was just watching this kid, and for me, it was like a sociological experiment, just looking at the kid going, I wonder what's fucked up with this kid. He is breaking my toys, or at least he's trying. I don't think he actually ended up breaking any of them, which is remarkable. But my father was in the other room with his brother. And of course, you're hearing this huge commotion in the room, right? And my dad comes in and this little punk standing on the bed breaking my stuff. What a dick, right? And he never changed, man. He never changed. And he got bawled out. My dad was like, he didn't want to touch his brother's kid, but he was like, he's a military dude. And so, boy, a little bit of piss ran down this kid's leg, man. Of course, it was only temporary because his brain doesn't work that well. But that made me kind of think, well, geez, what he was doing was really wrong. I wasn't crazy. And he got in trouble. I don't want to be in trouble. That's scrappy. But why would I break anyone else's toys? They're fun to play with. Why would I do that? If I break it out of jealousy or something, then I don't get to play with it, right? It was a very formative moment for my life, And I'll just remind you, folks, that if you hear these huge ideas, one thing I'm reiterating in this season, because for the very first time in my life, I'm seeing monumental changes in people's consciousness towards good, is that, you can now finally, I think, have faith in changing the world for the better. Yes, if part of it is to work it out as an analogy in your mind, we're trying to drain the swamp, which is global. We as the citizens and some leaders are very dedicated to doing it. Now, we as the citizens, we can speak our mind because we don't have video cameras on us. We're not politicians. We're not celebrities that if we happen to lean right / centric constitutional kind of thinking, that the studios may ban us from working. Was it Tim Allen had his show canceled because he was supportive? Roseanne Barr had her show canceled and got kicked off her show and killed off her own fucking property because of a tweet she made. It was a pretty dumb tweet, but my God, we've got sexual predators out there being revered by Hollywood. It's just crazy. Is it Roman Polanski, right? Yeah, I did sleep with that 13-year-old girl, but she wanted it. Because there's so many faculties in the brain of a 13-year-old. Hey, man, if she had graduated high school 2 years later and then college 2 years after that, maybe we could think she was a bit of, advanced for her time or something, but I don't know of any reality for that. The internet is obviously being censored more now than ever. Zuckerberg, who, for whatever reason, you got to remember, he marries a Chinese girl. And, which, hey man, it's cool, man. Find your true love and do it. But then he tried when President Xi came over here, he tried to parade his wife in front of him. He made his daughter sing a song, I think, in Mandarin or Cantonese or something. And the president of China was like, I'm not a fucking idiot, man. I know what you're trying to do here. You're trying to open up the spigot of, foreign investment. You're trying to widen your grasp. Zuckerberg wants to be on the list where he is not killed off in this huge mass extinction event that Agenda 21 wants to usher in. He wants to live. So they're not all winning at the top either, man. If we, as the people, can demonstrate to the leaders of the world that they are not going to take away our freedoms no matter what. I mean, I have just never seen America come together in a way that they have come together in this last month. It's a contagion. You talk about the virus that's going around. It is called freedom, baby. The woman, since I made my last Corona episode, there was a woman at a park not wearing a mask, being arrested by 2 police officers also without masks. She's hauled into prison, or not prison, in jail. I'm pretty sure she was released later that day. But what happens? The citizens of that town found out where the sheriff lived, or found out where one of these cops lives, and they surrounded his house. We're like, you're not taking away the constitutional rights of this woman because she's simply not buying your Kool-Aid, man. It's amazing. Law firms are all gunning up right now, man. They are getting ready for class action lawsuits against states, against cops. I mean, against just a few handful that have been doing this kind of stuff. I mean, seriously. I don't know if I mentioned on the show recently, but I mentioned to a friend of mine. We had, I think I did, so I apologize if this is a repeat, but this is kind of good to stick it in the library in a couple different places, just in case you don't see the other episode. We had two guys. I think they might have been brothers, but they held up a bank in downtown LA. And man, they were dressed in full body armor. Some of you remember this. I think it was like 93-ish. They had so much body armor on. And they had AK-47s with tons of magazines. I think they may have had 2 or 3 giant guns on them. Bunch of ammo. These are bad guys. I'm not trying to make them, sexy or anything. Cops were shooting them, but their body armor was just ping, 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 ping. They would just turn around and then they would unload, and they had armor-piercing rounds, ceramic rounds, right? Like 308s, which is an AK-47 round typically. It was going through engine blocks and hitting cops on the other side of the car. These poor cops trying to stop this thing. Well, one of them was walking down the sidewalk, helicopters on him. He finally just decides this is not going to go well, and he's not going to prison because he's now shot a police officer. So he knows that if he gets picked up and put in jail, they're going to kill him. They're going to beat him up. They're going to kill him, So he puts a pistol underneath his chin, blows the top of his head off. He had a mask on, a full ski mask on. So you see a little ting at the top, drops like a sack of potatoes. But the other dude was waiting for some other kid to come pick him up in a truck, I think. And so I don't remember how he got in this particular predicament, but he ended up getting shot in his side somewhere by a police officer, and he fell down and he was out. He was going to get definitely arrested. And a sheriff, which there are many sheriffs in LA, of course, sat on him and put his knee on him and just made sure that he was disarmed and he wasn't going to get back up, because this was nuts, man. He at that point, the sheriff's like, I think he's been shot. I see a little bit of blood, but by God, we unloaded 100, if not 10,000 rounds on these guys, and they just walked away from it, right? Because they have so much armor on. Well, the guy ends up dying, I think, on the spot. He took a little while to die because it took a little while to figure out if there were other gunmen. They were trying to arrest the kid in the truck, and, it was just a cluster. Well, the guy dies. The sheriff was doing his job. All the cops were just doing their job. They had no idea this kind of stuff was going to occur. because the dude blew himself away on the sidewalk, definitely not an FF, it's real. And the crazy thing was, it was just like a little teeny bank. I don't know how much money it was, but it wasn't that much cash to be going through that much of a problem, right? This was like Ocean's 11 kind of snatch and grab, and wasn't worth it. But anyway, the family of the guy that died second ends up suing that sheriff. It's been a very long time since I try to follow up on that information. So there may be more information to this story that is relevant here, and I apologize if I don't have all the details. But as I remembered it, within 2 years, the family, one tries to sue the precinct. I don't remember where that lawsuit went, but they went after the guy in civil court. Because you can. Any human being that takes away your rights, it doesn't matter where they work, you can sue him in civil court. The dude had his pension gutted, and I think eventually he was let off, but it gutted him financially. I mean, just imagine, you're just a guy doing your job and you lose everything, right? A lot of these guys have to mortgage their homes. They put all their money into their home and other properties. Well, they mortgage everything they can to pay off attorneys so that they don't lose. I think the LAPD just let him go. I mean, there's nothing they could do to legally help the guy. They can't just write him a check out of the taxpayers' dollars, right? It's just like General Flynn. The government can't go in and give Flynn money so he can fight these ridiculous charges he had on him, right? So every single police officer out there that is violating religious rights, I mean, these cops that owe people tickets in these church parking lots, in their cars, completely quarantined from the rest. Probably the most effective way to be in public and not affect anyone else besides your family, which you already live with, is to be in a car. You're all showered up, you're in your Sunday best, and you're sitting in the car listening to your radio, and these guys give them all $500 tickets. I'm gonna, and Attorney General Barr called them all up and said, you do that one more time and I'm gonna fuck you up. So now they're done. They're not doing it anymore. But they're chasing, housewives with kids because they're not wearing masks. Dragging a guy off a bus in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, something like that. The people are fighting back. I've never seen it in my lifetime. Heard about it during the 60s riots and all that kind of stuff, but that was really just kind of like, we're gonna march on against the war. The government's not gonna listen. They didn't listen. I don't even think our pulling out in 74 or whatever had anything to do with those protests, as much as we'd like to think so. I think that Martin Luther King had a huge impact with his marches and his speeches. But we shouldn't have to rely on a Martin Luther King all the time. One person with a voice, one genius that sees it all, holding us all up, because they could just kill that person. They can't kill every single one of us. How many times have you seen the memes online where it says, what could they possibly do if we all came out? And what's sick about it, and this is where I think a court case would be so utterly short, is that we know that the Constitution of the United States, and again, I don't know what your country has, but it supersedes all things. You cannot, under any circumstance, violate the Constitution of the United States. You can't. Now, the Fourth Amendment is getting violated every single day, which is why they had to put the FISA court over the data and say, okay, we're gathering all the information, but we are not looking at it until we get a FISA warrant. We know certain agencies do, even though it's illegal. But that's something that's over grandma's head, right? Okay, grandma, every time you send a text message, well, I don't send text messages. Well, you kind of send, our grandchild one. Oh, that what that is? Yeah. Well, they gather up all your data. Okay, I'm lost already, right? But if you told grandma you can't go to the grocery store because you're locked in your house. Why? Well, they say there's a pandemic. What, 1 million people have died? No, but they've made projections like Al Gore that it was going to happen. Now all the projections are wrong. And of course, they want to take credit for those projections going south. Well, it's because we did what we did. If COVID hasn't taught you about fake bully science, I don't know what will. But we're all scared. We're all scared to say anything against it. Again, I'll just remind you, there's a correlation between climate change theory and COVID theory. And it goes like this. Climate change says the world is supposed to have perfect weather according to its geographical location on Earth. So if it's supposed to be cold and freezing, well, it's supposed to be cold and freezing. It can never, ever, ever raise above 0 Celsius or above 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It can't. Because they've just decided they're entitled to good weather everywhere they go. If there's a hot day in Vegas, well, oh my God, the world's going to end. If there's a cold day in the winter in Kansas, well, oh my God, the whole world's going to end. Because they're entitled to perfect weather constantly. Well, how does it work with COVID? No one's ever to have an abrupt death because of an illness they didn't see. I just watched a little documentary someone made about people in Star Trek franchise that have passed away that you didn't know they passed away. And I'd say about half of them, now, of course, this is the kid that had the accident with the Jeep. Both the little kids are dead. I didn't realize both of them are dead. The kid that played the little Klingon, he's gone. And then the kid that played the little Ferengi is gone. It's just nuts. But half of these deaths were like really fast deaths. Remember Jim Henson? The dude just got the flu or something and he was gone. I mean, he wasn't a spring chicken, but he was hardly elderly. It took me a while to remember that one of the most random causes of death that has been in my life with first degree, maybe second degree friends is pneumonia. Pneumonia can just hit anyone at any age, the perfect storm, because there's 7.5 billion people on this planet. Perfect storms happen way more than you think with medical problems because we were weaned off of healthy food onto sugar. Yeah, you do have an 18-year-old kid catch a pass, make a touchdown, and on his way back to the locker room, he has a heart attack because he's drinking like 4 or 5 energy drinks a day and his arteries are as hard as glass, right? But today, with COVID, one, they keep lowering the standard of what qualifies for COVID, right? So all other illnesses are like vanishing off the face of the planet. Like the only way we die on planet Earth now is COVID, right? And that's not even a joke. They're lowering the standards. They're subsidizing payments to hospitals so they can monetize these fake diagnoses. Test kits still suck, right? I read a report that said that any test kit for a human condition has about a 10 to 15% chance of a false positive. A buddy called me the other day and he said, look, I was being tested for all this stuff while he was at the hospital. He said he tested positive for HIV twice while he was in the hospital. And of course, his doctor was like, because his T cell levels were all over the place on a daily, hourly basis. And he says, doctor goes, I know you don't have HIV, but you've come up, positive. So I'm going to run your tests again because the tests are coming back crappy. With, 10 to 15% false positives on any one test that you take, it's a blurry science. But what's pneumonia do? It attacks your lungs. Now, when you catch anything, fluid in your lungs is a very basic problem that you start having. And so I think that everyone's getting entitled. You're never to die of anything random. You can do lines of Coke. You can eat crappy food, GMO foods. You can eat out of fast food all day long. You're not to gain any weight and you're never to have any catastrophic organ failures. Your immune system, you're entitled to a beautiful immune system no matter what you do to your body. You can be entitled to a great immune system as long as you treat your body well. But maybe you have to get out and walk every once in a while. I went on a big walk today. And there's closet alcoholics all over the place too, man. And I dated this girl. She's amazing, but I met her online through a funny little playing words with friends thing. And then I made friends with her. And I said, we should go on a date. And she's like, why? And I said, well, because. And she says, well, I'm really sick today. She just lives down, a few miles from me. And I said, well, let me bring you a little care package to help you out. And, okay, great. Well, she played it off like she had the cold or a flu. What did she really have? A massive hangover. And it was like a weekly thing, drinking so much that she had major health issues. She already had some pre-existing health conditions as well. And so what if she were to catch pneumonia in the midst of binging alcohol, which absolutely obliterates your immune system? Well, she'd go to the hospital. She would have no immune system to fight pneumonia. And then she's literally in a life and death situation. She's on a ventilator. She's got every single symptom COVID claims to have, which at this point now, they're trying to blur those lines intensely. But yeah, I went to the store and they said, I forgot to finish my story. I went to the grocery store and I couldn't get in without a mask on. And it's like, okay, this is hysteria at this point, right? What's interesting is I think that a lot of you remember that the world was a lot smarter without much technology. We just thought logically. And someone in my hometown, a woman just turned 109 the other day. And this is the story I've been repeating since I started the show. My hometown, the obituary is very interesting because you have this group of people dying at 100, or not, she's not even dead yet. She just had her 109th birthday. But you have all these people who are still alive at around 100 or above. And the people that are dying are in their 90s or super late 80s. And then there's this blank spot where no one's alive because they all died in their 50s and 60s. And the timeline overlay to these people's deaths and their obituaries is that they were in the margarine, saccharin, aspartame, GMO world. They were being weaned off of healthy foods. They stayed inside more because they're watching TV more. They're getting fat, and they're having issues. Now, if you know what you're doing and you're willing to take the risk because it's just the life that you love, man, you're not contagious if you have a heart attack because you're obese. Probably a lot of us would wish that you would live longer, but if you're happy all the way to the very end, that's your business. But what I'm talking about are the people that have no clue that they're doing this to themselves, right? I think it was RT did an article a few weeks ago, and they said they were actually acknowledging, and I don't like RT. I mean, they write a bunch of absolutely disinfo articles. They try to create World War III every single day that they can. I swear to God. If there's an evil regime, RT is completely for them. It's crazy. But they said they finally connected the dots between this glorifying obesity and this fat shaming movement and said, this isn't working. This isn't working. You're telling kids that it's totally cool to be obese and telling the parents that their kids being obese, because usually the parents are obese, is totally cool. But these kids are racking up massive medical bills before they're even 20 years old. Because they're having problems that nobody has at that age as long as you eat normal food. One of the things you might do, because I think that one of the sort of subtexts of a lot of the shows, if I don't mention it outright, which I have in many of the episodes, but I like to give you guys weaponry to fight the good fight. I'm trying to build you that Batman belt that no matter what the hell's going on in that guy's life, he's got a little thing he pulls out to do it, right? To solve his problem. He's falling off a building. Well, he's got a raster hook, boom, he throws it up there and doesn't cut him in half. It perfectly stops him slow and he can then crawl up the side of the building, right? We need a bunch of those. And that's the power of memes too. Man, who would have ever thought 30 years ago that you would see a picture with some words on it that is worth 10 years of conspiratorial investigation, right? Just one little meme makes you go, oh yeah, this is screwed up. They're usually the best memes reveal truthful counter logic to pseudo-science, to pseudo groupthink, herd mentality. one of the other phenomenons, and being the author of this show, is that I get a lot of messages from folks that are just, it's sort of like the best messages I get from folks because it's almost unanimous. Everyone has to send me this sort of message, and it warms my heart when I get these sort of communications, whether it be public posts in the comments section on YouTube or in our Facebook group that's locked, but a lot of private messages too, which is someone says something like, you're completely right about that. This is bullshit. My country's doing this. The United States is doing that. Where I live, it's this way, and it's completely insane. People at my work are drinking the Kool-Aid, and I'm the only one awake or whatever. Someone's got a spouse that's still asleep. Because at least that's the first stage. Again, we trade information without speaking. That's another thing you have to remember. So the more that you become educated, it takes a lot longer to transfer information, I think, unless you're having the conversation about it. But that's why when I have conversations with friends of mine who believe all this hyped up science, the pseudo kind, I can get a vibe off somebody that they're informed, or I can get a vibe off someone that it's just a machine talking to me. And then there's sort of that second tier assessment, which is, okay, do they really mean the world good? And usually it comes back, absolutely. We're just disagreeing about what's wrong and exactly how to fix it. One of the ones that I mention a lot, I mentioned it several times on the show, but if we're just going to trade tricks here, is that, someone says, trying to guilt trip me for nuclear power plants or oil or coal or, some use of energy. And I just stop them in their tracks. And it's funny because when I say what I'm about to say, they have no recourse. And you see them start to be Robbie the Robot with the logic problem, self-destructing. And I say, I let them get it all out of their system because they think that if you're, again, defending freedom, then you're for, killing babies or something. It's weird. Quite the opposite, isn't it? But I'll say, look, did you choose oil? Did your parents choose oil? Did your grandparents choose oil? Did your great-great-great-grandparents choose oil? Mine didn't, and yours didn't either. Did you choose nuclear power plants so you could refine up, uranium fuel to be made into plutonium? I mean, it's a business. It's part of the pipeline of making plutonium is to have nuclear power plants. It's part of the game. That's why they do not want Iran to have a nuclear power plant. It allows them to refine uranium and other things that can turn into plutonium. Once you let them know that no one's making these choices but the people at the top, and don't talk to me, man. Greta's talking to the wrong people. And, one of the other points I make is you don't live with Greta, man. So why are you worried about keeping this little 15-year-old who should be in fucking school happy? It doesn't have anything to do with your life. She's getting paid to be a bad actress, man. But I have friends that, I mentioned Greta once, several months ago. And my friend went, "Oh, you don't like Greta?" It was a sincere statement. Again, my friend's a good person. Totally wants to fix the world. We totally disagree on what's wrong and how to fix it. But it was just, they created a propaganda prop, smuggling in this fake agenda through a child who's got serious mental issues, okay? The worst actress, too. I mean, my God, you can't find a kid who can act, who will buy the Kool-Aid because you're the parent. I mean, there seems to be a ton of pop stars that are 100% into this, right? I know you feel me. As always, I'm interested in your comments. The comments right now are A+, grade A comments. I swear to God, even if someone's disagreeing with me, it's got quality information in it normally. It's really great. Someone was complaining about the show being in black and white again. It's just funny. It's their first show. That's why they don't get it. Someone needs to buy him a color camera. This is in 4K color, okay? Let me know what you think. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, that's where you go to express yourself other than this video if you're watching on YouTube. We have 2 video, 2 audio, 4 social media. The one worth mentioning there is the locked Facebook group. Come on in, say something human. If you created a brand new account, definitely say something human. Otherwise, we'll suspect you to be a robot. That's not fair to you. You have a couple ways to donate to the show, but again, times are tough. I get it. For those of you who are sacrificing even $1, thank you so much. You get in the credits forever. You get the episodes several days before other people in some cases, and a good pipeline to me directly. We have a store, in case you're interested in that. We also have season 1 off on its own channel on YouTube. That's the first 102 or 4 episodes. So go over there, subscribe, get through the episodes, unsubscribe. It's good. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel and you dig this kind of content, go ahead and click it. If you think you're subscribed, make sure you're still subscribed, because you might be going off a hot link off social media and you're not really subscribed anymore. So you should get notifications. There's the bell, but that's only up if you want that little ding to happen. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.